All right. My name is Krista Mosher, and I am your T-Call host for this morning's new directors training and onboarding. We are super glad that you are here. Maria Morrow and Kara McVeigh from TWC are your presenters today, and I am going to let Kara take it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Krista. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well and that the weather is being kind to you. It is not being kind to me. I'm starting to look at investing in a canoe, a kayak, maybe a John boat. Not really sure yet because it's raining really bad. My name is Kara McVeigh. I am your TWC grant manager for all of the core grants, and I just want to welcome you all. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Some of you have heard about me, and I'm happy to be here, happy to have you all here, and I'm ready to share my knowledge with you all. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the PowerPoint that's called the new AEL providers staff. Yes, attachment A for new AEL providers is the name of the PowerPoint, and we're going to start going through it. So we're going to talk about your attachment A and why it's important. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right on in. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some history and the process of information that has come about with the attachment A, and then we're going to cover what is in the attachment A in depth. If you were present for the new director training yesterday, this slide does more than likely look familiar to you. This was in Elena's presentation yesterday morning. Yes, we are in the second grant cycle, or the RFA, or procurement cycle, as we like to refer to it. The award duration, there was some confusion on this yesterday, so let me clarify. We talked about the first 2 years are guaranteed, and then it's 3 one-year optional renewals. Ultimately, look at it this way. Your grant cannot go past 5 consecutive years. So the timeline, we're already starting to go through the RFA development process, so we have that all hammered out. We're reviewing things that we want to change, things that we want to keep, and then we're going to start getting it ready to go so that in the RFA review process, it's the advertising, the prepping, the marketing, the getting it posted in the electronic service, the ESBD for the marketplace for contracts. And then the evaluating of applications will start in January through June. RFA response time did say 8 weeks, but it really, the response on getting an award is possibly more than 8 weeks. There's a lot of internal workings at TWC for that, and it's taking a lot longer to get some things done than we prefer, but it's just the nature of the beast and how we do things. Irregardless of what's happening internally, the RFA would start July 1st of 2023. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. So we're going to jump into what is the attachment A and why is it important? So the attachment A is what we call your scope of work in your grant. It has legal citations that are important for you or for legal reasons, what the expectations are, what kind of services are to be provided, the types of reports that we require and when they are due, reporting requirements that need to be met, data that's going to be collected, positions that are to be staffed, and all sorts of other great information. So moving forward. Okay, so the attachment A has several sections. We have the first section, which is your project abstract, and it's what is your grant about? It tells us what it is, the reason it's there, and what we're looking to do with it. Then it's going to be the legal citations in the applicable grant authorities and the allowable services and activities. Those are legal citations for both of those sections. Eligibility, Maria's definitely going to go into more depth on, and it's going to be about who is eligible for AEL services. If there's ever a question about who is eligible, we have all kinds of resources available, not just in your attachment A, but elsewhere, that are easy to figure out who's eligible and who's not. The most important parts really are sections 5 and section 6. And the grant specific requirements, this is about what services are to be provided, staff that you need to have hired, activities and performance measures. These are your reporting data. And then section 7 is your reporting requirements. And we're going to go over these last 3 sections in depth, but mostly we're going to spend a lot of time on sections 5 and section 6. Okay, so this is what a attachment A is going to look like for you in the near future. Obviously, where it says grantee name, that is going to be the name of your institution or your whoever the entity is. And okay, so we have section 1, the project abstract. Well, okay, that's pretty succinct and a pretty good sentence. You know, it doesn't have to be like a dissertation. It doesn't have to be multiple paragraphs of what you're trying to do. When we're writing reports in college, you know, they want us to start, if I remember correctly, in APA format, they want you to have a project abstract so that you can get an idea of what it is that you're going to be reading about in the article as you continue. Same principle here with this contract. We don't need to go over all the legalese in sections 2 and in section 3 because see, there's lots of legal citations. There's discussion of the AFLA Title II of the chapter of WIOA in the public library. See, I can't even tell you what all these citations are because, yeah, that's a lot of stuff I don't know about. And then we're just scrolling on down, going into the eligibility. So Maria's going to talk more about this. I'm not going to go over eligibility too much. I'm just going to point it out to you. Moving forward. Okay, now grant specific requirements. This is super duper important, and I'm going to go over a lot of this. So, okay, so what we're saying is that you would adhere to all federal agency rules, state federal guidance, agency guidance for AEL branding, and it doesn't really get good until section 5.7. Depending on where you're located in the state, obviously you're going to have varying amounts of grant money. Some people have millions of dollars, or at least some areas have millions of dollars because of their size. Other areas have a few $100,000. Others have less than $100,000. And that's okay because it's all determined on the back end. And we understand that staff is not always easily able to be met for the requirements because of the location of where you're at. So one thing that I will say, and I can't remember if I've got it in the PowerPoint or not, but we're going to talk a little bit about the required staffing that you need to have. You have to have a director. You have to have one full-time employee at 100% as your director. That means that this director, they don't need to be involved in other state initiative projects if your institution has applied for and been granted state initiative projects, because they can't sufficiently dedicate their time from 100% in one program to another 100% in another program. It's just too complicated, and it really can make some things not work the way that they should. Another position is the lead for quality assurance. Okay, the lead for quality assurance and the lead for performance accountability. We want it to be a function of a position of at least equivalent of 10% for lead for quality assurance, as well as lead for performance accountability, but there's a caveat to that. Please do not have your lead for quality assurance and your lead for performance accountability be the same person. The reason we're asking for that is because that can be seen as a conflict of interest, and we don't want that. You don't want conflicts of interest. So it's okay if you have to assign things to other staff members, but just make sure that you don't have the same person assigned as your lead for QA and your lead for performance accountability. It just doesn't work. And yeah, you got to have your PD coordinator, your professional development coordinator. Okay, they should be able to dedicate about 20% of their time to this position. And then there's the lead for distance learning, your instructional lead, and your career navigator. Yeah, I don't think the career navigator, I think the career navigator has more than 20%. I want to say they're closer to 100% for their position because it's so intensive. But anyway, so those are positions, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we continue.
Kara, you have a question?
I have a question.
Yes. Well, maybe you don't have a question. Somebody has a question for you.
Oh boy.
What is another name for a QA and PA? It is a function of a program coordinator, PD specialist, and
I have no idea. Hey, Maria, you got an answer on that one?
So they're separate titles. The QA is the quality assurance person, and your PA is your performance accountability person. That's what we call them. You can look at your RFP to see what the required tasks are for that. The grants do have flexibility to call it something else, but your examples here for PD specialist, a PD specialist should be separate from like the quality assurance person and the performance accountability person. But I would refer to your RFP to take a look at or your contract, because not a lot of you have access to your RFP, but you should have access to your contract, and you can look at what the required tasks are and see what position that fits, as far as the job titles that you have in your grant.
okay. And there's a couple more questions. What is the title for the follow-up person?
That would be the follow-up person. Those services can be given under the career navigator. That's really more of a local flexibility thing. Yes, we want you to have somebody that does the follow-ups on students as they transition out and follow them, because that is the model that we're starting to go to. From what I've heard around the state, a lot of providers are putting that specific activity under their career navigators.
All right. And then there is one more question. Where are we meant to officially indicate who is in these roles?
I don't understand the question.
Susan, do you want to unmute and ask?
Yes, at a meeting recently, we were asked who was in the QA role. And so seeing this list makes me think that maybe we haven't. I'm just saying, where are we meant to document? Sally is our QA person and Joe is our performance accountability person. Or is that just internal to us? We need to have
It's just an internal to you. This is not a document thing that we have to have at TWC. Yeah, the conflict of interest stuff, the thing is we're trying to, keep everybody on the level, do everything ethically and responsibly. And that's why we give a best practice of your QA and your lead for quality assurance and your lead for performance accountability should not be the same person. Obviously, if you have a very small program and you have staff that wears a lot of different hats, you just got to make sure that they're not the same duties with one person. It's just like if somebody is responsible for in your accounting department is responsible for the accounts payable functions and there's no one on another spot to check them, it is entirely possible for somebody to embezzle a lot of money from a program or a provider or anything like that. Now, as I said, this is just an example of a way to try to prevent, some unethical things from happening. And that's really what it's tailored for, is trying to keep everybody on the level, everything ethical, because otherwise, it's not going to be good for anybody. So don't panic about the whole fraud thing. That's just an example.
All right, a couple other more questions have come in. What positions are allowed to be combined?
Well, your director cannot be combined with anything else because how are you going to get more than 100% from a director? I mean, that's just, yeah, how are you going to do that? Your QA and your lead for QA and your lead for PA, just make sure it's not the same person. Your PD coordinator, I am not sure what all goes into that. You could possibly put that person with, there's really no guidance. Okay, let me put it that way. There's really no guidance on what you can combine. We just prefer and would appreciate if, as a best practice, that your lead for quality assurance and your lead for performance accountability are not the same person. That's it.
Okay. There's a comment here, considering the exponential growth of AEL services and accountability, it would be helpful in terms of roles and responsibilities if most of these positions' time on task were increased. What is currently stated does not adequately reflect the amount of time and effort truly needed to perform quality work. And I see that Anne responded to that with the time requires the minimum. Grantees should make the decision about what they need.
Yeah, there's in the slide specifically, it says minimum, except for the director. Everything else is at a minimum of whatever the percentage of full-time and effort. So if you have somebody that is, okay, the career navigator, for instance, they should have somebody that is a minimum of 20% at full-time and effort. Well, based off of all the job duties that a career navigator has, it's not 20% at all. I think it's closer to like 75% or more. And that's just from what I have gleaned over the past couple of years doing in phone call conversations with providers and just information I have gathered in general about the career navigators. So, I mean, in order to have a program, we are just saying in the attachment A that these specific requirements are at a minimum what you need to meet to be considered in compliance, quote unquote. Now, I'm going to need some help here. In the chat, how many of you work for a school district or work for a college? I'm assuming it's all of you, if not most of you. Okay, so the question is really, how long does it take for you to be able to get somebody hired into your AEL program? Just pop it in the chat.
Forever and a day, 4 to 6 weeks, 4 months, 1 month minimum, long time, 6 to 8 weeks, up to 90 days, 4 to 8 weeks. I work for a college. It takes up to 2.5 weeks, depending on whether they have lived out of state. Another program is within a week or so, 2 to 3 months, 3+ months, 2 to 3 weeks. So it's all over the place. Long 6 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, 4 to 6 weeks is not that long. I'm thinking more in terms of months. That means from the moment that the job position is, once the interviews have been completed and you're working through to get a selection made, or you're even just trying to get a position posted. If it takes a very long time, well, this is where you as a director, or I want you all to consider advocating for your programs to your local leadership. And here's what I mean by that. When you have a very long period of time of trying to get staff hired and into these positions, these required positions within the AEL program, what you can do is you could take a copy of your attachment A and say to your leadership, we are technically not in compliance with this grant. These are the positions that we need to have filled. So if it's taking more than 6 to 8 weeks to get somebody hired, like 3 or 4 months or so, I would seriously use the compliance situation as what you can do to try to get your local leadership on board with, okay, we need to get somebody hired and we need to get them on hired now, because nobody wants to be out of compliance when it comes to a contract. Nobody, because it can end up being not good for business. Not to say that there's anything we can really do about that, but the whole thing is if you're short-staffed, you can't, I don't want your programs to stay short-staffed for too long, because people do get burnout, people do quit, and then you're left with a much bigger issue of not filling one position, but filling 2 or 3 or more. I do understand that there are local constraints, specifically with getting full-time people hired or getting part-time people hired. I do understand that. And please know that I am more than willing to have a conversation, if I have to, with you and with your leadership to help figure this out. If there's anything that any of you have learned in the year, 2 or 3, or just a few months that you've worked with me, I am 100% down to help you and support you and get your program where it needs to go. Any other comments, questions?
There's one other question that isn't completely related to what specifically you were just saying. Does the Career Navigator have specific educational requirements, or is it up to the grantee when hiring?
That is up to the grantee when hiring. What I've heard statewide is typically they want somebody that has a college education, has maybe their degree is in business or social work or something along those lines, because the Career Navigator is a very case management heavy position. I encourage some of my newer directors to, buddy up with some of the other directors that have been here for a minute. Not to put anybody on the spot, but Maria Chris out of Region 1, can you speak a little bit about that, on what you're doing with your Career Navigator? Would you mind unmuting?
Okay. What specifically did you want me to go into? Any specific points?
You were looking for a Career Navigator, right?
Yes.
And for the follow-up services, what is the level of education that you were looking for? And
Okay.
What is the background?
Yes. Regarding that, I have had to work with the job description a couple of times already. And what I've done is that, because we are a regional, service center, oftentimes they required individuals that, had been in public ed or had experience in that. But I went back to change the job description to where it made that as preferred, not required, because I really wanted people that were already in the private sector or may have experience already in working with the Texas Workforce Commission or have more information on it. And a bachelor's degree is also preferred. I'm not going to go with, they can have an associate's or something like that. And a bachelor's degree does not have to be in public ed. It could be in something like, either social work or communications or journalism or things like that. Because if they have that sort of experience, they already know how to begin making those partnerships. And one of the other regional service centers, and I'm hoping I'm giving credit to the right person out there at Region 5, I believe. What they've done also is in working with individuals who do a lot of case management, they work partly out of the one-stop station at the Workforce Commission. So I'm including that in the new job description as well. So I'm more than happy to share the job description.
Thank you, Maria. I greatly appreciate your insight and your input on that. That's really helpful. One thing I would like for everybody that's here is I would appreciate if you all would feel free to interact with each other offline, because we are one giant team when it all comes down to it. We are one giant team serving students across the state. And if you're not sure who to reach out to, or you have a question, you can always reach out to your program specialist. You can reach out to me and I'll see if I can't come up with an idea of somebody who you need to talk to. But basically we're all in this together. We are all oars on the same boat, trying to get it paddled to where it needs to go. So, any other questions on positions as it stands right now?
Just a few comments. So no other questions that I see.
Okay. Alrighty, so moving forward. All right, standard operating procedures. Section 5.8, we request typically your standard operating procedures cover these 5 areas: recruitment and advertising, comprehensive assessment, testing and placement, orientation for your incoming students, customer profile data collection, PII and data management, and your referral or co-enrollment across core programs. I'm kind of try to, I appreciate us having that conversation. That was so much fun for me. Okay, in section 5.15 through 5.29, AEL instruction and services, we talk about all these different things. These are all separate sections. We talk about the text chase, prep and instruction, ESL programs, on-ramp to post-secondary education or training, integrated English literacy and civics, EL civics, career pathways for IETs and intensive services, educational technology and distance learning, financial literacy, professional development of your staff, services to corrections education and other institutionalized individuals, family literacy, and bilingual education. So these are all separate sections within your attachment A contract, which was, we sent out a Word document with the contract with a attachment A in the email for today. And okay, so section 6, activities and performance measures. The deliverables table in section 6 tells you what is being reported on, how many of the reports are due, and when the reports are due. Some of them have actual dates listed, some of them do not. Yes, changes from the previous program year are designated by being in bold type. All deliverables that are sent to TWC need to be sent to the AEL contracts email address. Okay, so sending and deliverables. You are going to hear multiple times throughout the year on biweekly calls, emails, anything, that you have to, when you have a deliverable that's due, you must submit it with your TWC contract number in the deliverable file name, as well as in the subject line of the email. Any deliverable that is submitted by one entity, I need you to multiply that by 37. So, and I'll go into that a little bit more. What takes a provider 2 seconds to do, it takes me as a grant manager 15 minutes or more to determine who turned in what and when. And not to mention, if you don't know what your TWC grant number is, I put it in just about every subject of email that I send to you all, or it's in any file that I have sent to you. Okay, the screenshot that's on the right, that is a screenshot of one of my screens. I have a program set up to run all of the attachments that are sent into us into that folder. Currently, there are 350 plus attachments, and about 200 of those don't have the contract numbers in the file name, as you see listed in this list here. I implore you in this new program year, please, 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 please make sure that your TWC contract number is in the file name of the file you're sending to us, and it's in the subject line of the emails when you send them. Okay, sending in deliverables continued. So what does the contract number look like? On the attachment A that I sent out to you, it looks like the bold type on the far left, XX18 ALA00X. XX18 is the board area you're located in, and it's the first fiscal year of the procurement. So for Amarillo, it would be 0118 ALA. For ACC, it would be 1418 ALA 000. There was a contract program that we used prior to now that gave everything zeros. Moving forward, it's all going to start off on ones. So the 00X is what provider you are in the areas that there are more than one AEL core provider grants awarded. That really only affects about 12 providers as it stands right now. And so don't worry too much about that part. But I do need you to make sure that the 01 or 23, 18, ALA, 00, whatever, is on your file names and your subject lines. Okay, so the next question is, and I'm sure that this is on everybody's mind, well, what happens when I don't turn in my deliverables on time? Well, there's something that I have to do every year, and it's an annual risk assessment. And what it is I have to rate providers on the level of risk involved, depending on if your deliverables are turned in on time or late, or if they're even turned in at all. So how is it rated? Well, low score, it's typically rated on like a 1 to 10 score. Between 1 and 4 is low risk, 5 to 7 is average risk, and 8 through 10 is considered high risk. Well, low scores mean that you're considered low risk. That means it's a good investment. We're going to keep doing this. Average scores, okay, that's your B or C rating. It means there's some risk involved, but it's not too much to worry about. The providers that are always late and don't turn in the deliverables at all, those are considered high risk. So this is it's just a rating system. The rating system, we have something called a vendor performance report that we have to fill out towards the end of procurements. And that means the entire contract term. And it's a rating system. It could mean that later in the future, the rating of your institution is not high enough and it could be considered a high risk investment. And that could possibly end up in not being awarded a contract if it's considered high risk. This is all, I believe, public information, and it's listed on the ESBD. I never can remember the name of that website. I just remember the acronym. So, but don't panic too much about this, because I got you. All right. So when the new program year starts, I have started sending out calendar events for each provider, actually for all providers. And most of the time I have a reporting template attached. All you have to do is click attend and the event is added to your calendar. I also make sure that the events are prepared with a 2-week in advance reminder so that you don't have to worry too much about, okay, well, am I going to forget this? Am I going to forget this? Now, if you click dismiss on the reminder, it's going to go bye-bye and it's not going to tell you anymore. But if you click snooze, it'll probably wait until like the next day. Okay, so this is not listed on the attachment A, but this is a best practice. And you're going to hear this several times throughout the program years. Grant amendments can occur throughout the program year, and it is vital that there is change, that if there is a change in your local signature authority, or if a director leaves, you are required for the grant terms and conditions to notify us within 10 days. I have set up quarterly reminders to request that if there's been a change, that somebody notify us here at TWC. That's why we keep hammering on it ever so often, because the last thing I would like to happen, and this has almost happened, is an amendment go out and be sent to the wrong signature authority, and that person's no longer with the provider, or that could end up being that the grant is being extended for an additional period of time, and it's the final day to get that signature, and that person's no longer there. Well, sometimes there's internal constraints in your institution when it comes down to getting a grant amendment signed, and that can take a long time. because sometimes there's legal departments that have to review all this stuff. So this is why we hammer on so much about, hey, if there's been a change, please let us know. Hey, if there's been a change, please let us know. Because really, I don't want anybody to be put into a situation where it's the final hour of the grant and there's no signature and it ends like the next day and there's no way to get it fixed. There's always a way to get it fixed. Don't get me wrong. I just don't want anybody to be without funding for any reason. Okay. All right. So sending in deliverables. Do you have a template for us to fill out for reporting? Yes, there is a template that is attached to each calendar event that are for different deliverables. I do this to assist you all. So instead of me sending out one email to everybody, it's basically on your calendar event and you don't have to go hunt down an email. It's just, where's your calendar event? Double click on it. You should have the attachment there. Okay, so we're almost done. Your reporting requirements. 7.1 is the table of quarterly progress report dates. There is some new changes in the program year allocation. Instead of having to write a narrative every quarter and turn it in, there's now going to be a requirement for 3 quarterly reports throughout the year. And the 4th quarter data will be included in an end of year report. There will be a template, don't panic, I got you, of what all is going to be required. Here's the reason we did this. We did this because, first off, this is the new director training that we're doing here. There are a lot of you, and how many of you are going to be able to go and pull data from 3 or 4 years ago when you weren't even here? That's going to be a big report, and that's going to be a big lift for you. So what we're trying to do is to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more digestible, instead of one huge giant final narrative that has data from before you as a director started, basically just having it updated every year. So then it's comprehensive at the end and we make it much easier to understand and move forward with. So the final report requirements are going to have the following: a description of the project, review of the activities accomplished, the project goals achieved during the grant period, the obstacles encountered, your key stakeholders with their contact information, private business partners with contact info, positive outcomes, best practices, areas needing improvement, and finally, review of the TWC AEL program management. Okay, so any questions?
No questions.
Fabulous.
And Maria Gonzalez said your calendar events are so helpful. Thank you for always doing that.
Yeah, I see a comment from Liz Moya. I'd hate to be in your shoes, Kara. That's funny. Yeah, there's a reason that I hammer so much about, y'all, I need your contract numbers in the deliverables, please. I need your contract numbers in the deliverables, please. Because anything that one of you do, just multiply it 37 times. Okay, well, I am going to conclude the attachment A discussion. As always, I am always available if you have questions, if you aren't sure about something.
All right, sit back and get ready to learn about AEL services and eligibility.
Okay, thank you, Krista. So welcome back, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed Kara's section on attachment A. Mine is entitled AEL Service and Eligibility, but we're really going to focus on eligibility here, and I will discuss services a little bit more tomorrow. And as we go through here, we're going to do it a lot like Kara's, where you can ask your questions in the chat, and I'll just stop throughout the presentation and answer questions that you have. So let's go ahead and get started. Also, just to let you know, my section is not going to be as quick as Kara's, but I do hope that you enjoy it. Okay, let's get started here. Okay. So in order to begin classes, a candidate for AEL must complete the process to ensure that they meet all necessary guidelines, not only being evaluated for services, but that documentation is collected and filed, which will verify eligibility. The eligibility process can have many layers, and that is why it is very important that a system is in place so that nothing is overlooked or forgotten. Today, you'll be introduced to the requirements and provided with information to help you understand AEL eligibility. You'll learn about the population which is served along with the criteria that must be met that verifies the eligibility of a candidate. You will also learn about self-attestation and how to determine whether or not someone is self-sufficient and can act on their own behalf in enrolling for services without parental consent. Testing and aspects of documentation will also be covered today. Please keep in mind that what is shared today is for information and learning to give you a fundamental understanding of grant requirements. For implementation of these requirements, it is advised that you refer to your program's SOP or program guidelines, because we're going to go over a lot of things that are, not local flexibility, but there are a lot of things that are local flexibility that you'll want to refer to your grant's SOPs regarding specifically to your grant. Listed here, we have the resources that I will be referring to throughout the presentation. If you have this electronically, which I believe you do, you can click on these and they will go to the letter or to the guide or to the resource that's listed here. And I do encourage you to check out these references or these resources that are referenced. And if you have further questions, you can always email AEL Technical Assistance at aelta@twc.state.tx.us. Now, like we said before, there are many layers when determining eligibility for AEL candidates. The objectives for today will be to enable you to navigate some of the main requirements the Texas Workforce Commission has established for grant recipients in the eligibility process. First, you aim to recall the criteria which must be met by an AEL candidate before they can receive services. Second, you will be able to identify documentation that must be collected and filed for each customer. And third, you will be able to recognize pre-testing options available for both ABE and ESL students. When working with such a diverse population and age range, knowing this information can often feel overwhelming. With today's training, you will have gained a good introduction to understanding AEL services and be on your way to successfully serving customers in this field. Now let's begin. The first thing to be assessed is whether a candidate can be classified under the eligible population to be served. Services can be provided to individuals as young as 16 years of age who are not enrolled or required to be enrolled in secondary school and are either basic skills deficient, do not have a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent, or is an English language learner. It is very important to emphasize that if an individual is still enrolled in high school, they cannot participate in AEL services. Again, I'm going to repeat, it is very important that if an individual is still enrolled in high school, they cannot participate in AEL services. This especially applies to 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, as Texas law requires them to be enrolled in school unless they are exempt from this rule. We will discuss this further on another slide, but if you would like more information on the guidance provided in this slide, it can be found in AEL Letter 0518 titled Self-Attestation for Age-Related Eligibility. Okay, do we have any questions yet?
No, we do not.
Okay, well, let's see how well you guys do with the first quiz. Oh, I forgot to tell you I would be quizzing you throughout this presentation, didn't I? Well, hopefully it'll be a fun quiz for you all. So in the chat, if you could tell me whether or not, the particular person could potentially qualify. Let's start with Alicia. She's a native Texan who did not complete high school. Could this person potentially qualify?
You're getting all yeses.
Okay, great. How about Manuel? He has a master's degree from Mexico in engineering.
And we're getting yeses again.
Good. Okay, Alyssa. A recent high school graduate, but did not qualify for college courses after taking the TSI.
All yeses again.
Okay. Right. And I did see a maybe in there. That's good because, definitely with all of these, we need to get more information. But, based on just this right here, it's potentially yes. So how about Hugo? He has been in the United States and only went up to 6th grade in his native country. Good. Good, good, good. And finally, Lars. He has a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Texas.
And we're getting those.
Denied. So, but we can refer him somewhere, right? So, all righty. Let's move on. We got another quiz question. Robert is a senior currently enrolled in Northlands High School and has heard that the local AEL program offers a TSI preparation course at no cost to participants. He is looking to get a head start on college and is interested in taking the course. He learned that the course is held at night and on the weekend. This is perfect for Robert because he could complete his high school classes during the day and take the TSI preparation course in his spare time. Would he be eligible for AEL services? Why or why not?
Getting a lot of no's. And Tara says he's enrolled in high school. He's still in school.
Very good. Yes. Yay. So, yes, that was the caveat there is he's still in high school. He cannot be in we cannot provide him services if he is still in high school. Oh, I'm sorry. Those were your choices. But you all didn't need them, did you? So, all right, moving on.
There's an actual question. So if he's homeschooled, he's eligible?
Oh, good question. If he is homeschooled, because he's not going to have, I want to say yes, but I'm going to refer to Anne here. Can you help me out, Anne Savino?
Hi, yeah, call a friend, right? Correct. I'm going to reinforce that through the AEL letter because since they're not officially enrolled in high school, which is funded through the Foundation School program, then he would be eligible. I am going to, while you carry on, I'm going to find the quotation in the letter.
Thank you, Anne.
And Tara said that he needs to fill out the self-attestation.
Yes.
So.
Which we'll get into in just a little bit. Thanks, Tara. Oh, that is sad, Liz. It says we got a lot of referrals from area high school principals to determine if they can drop their students. That is sad. And, we'd much rather somebody try to get a high school diploma. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. So under Texas law, as authorized by the Texas Education Code, listed here, ages 6 to 18 are required to attend school unless they are specifically exempted as outlined in that code. In order for an individual to participate in AEL services, they must be at least 16 years old and must not, again, be enrolled or required to be enrolled in secondary school. For those candidates who are 17 and 18 years of age, it is required that the AEL program establish their ability to attend services through the process of self-attestation. In the case of 16-year-olds, they would only be allowed to attend services only with a court order. And here we have a table that you can find in the guide, which does show in much simpler, easier to read way that a 16-year-old can only be by court order. And then for 17-year-olds, they will need to provide the written attestation that they are currently not enrolled in school, as well as any of the following: parent permission on the enrollment form, a court order, proof and or attestation that they live separate from a parent or guardian, or proof and or attestation of homelessness. And the same does also apply for 18-year-olds. And was there a question? I saw the chat pod kind of going.
Lorraine asks, if homeschooled, what documentation will the student provide? Is it the self-attestation form?
Yes.
Don't they need a high school credential for college prep? And then Anne, I think, responded to that with, depending on your college requirements, high school diploma is usually required for financial aid, but some colleges do not require it if self-pay.
Correct.
All right. I thought you need parent permission plus withdrawal form or alternative. Is that not true?
Right. So that's one of, for the 17 and 18-year-old, it's the self-attestation form or attestation, the student is not enrolled. So we want something that shows that they are not enrolled in school or are exempt from being enrolled in school. So in the case where Liz said earlier that they are, I forget her exact wording, but Liz had mentioned earlier that there were some principals that were trying to decide like which students that they could kind of like push out the door. This would be, you know, where they would get something from the school saying that they're exempt from being enrolled in school at this time. And they would need any of the following listed here, which, like you had mentioned, was parent permission, a court order, proof or attestation that they live separate from their parents or their guardian, or proof or attestation of homelessness. Does that help? I know I kind of reread what I said earlier, but let me know if that helps.
Yeah, I think that the word attestation is what threw me off because I was thinking of the attestation for homelessness and living apart, but that's essentially a withdrawal form, right?
Right. And then the form that they're going to sign that you have, that you're going to have an attestation form. And then, yes, up there it says attestation that the student, basically they're declaring, you know, right? You know, that the student, they do not have to be enrolled in school. That's their proof.
Right. And I just got a question on my direct message. Attestation simply means a statement by the person.
Right. All right. So in addition to all the required documentation that must be collected and filed for 16, 17, and 18-year-olds to participate in AEL services, all candidates must have a completed and signed enrollment form, a signed release of information form, and documentation of their identity on file. The enrollment form must include the signed release of information form in each participant file in order to share information with any other entities, which includes a statement of confidentiality in line with the FERPA for entry into the AEL statewide management information system. The signed release must address FERPA, the information release protections, and include who is authorized to release the information, who is authorized to receive the information about the specific types of records that may be released, and the purposes of the information released. A file must also include documentation of the participant's identity as part of eligibility requirements. And for the most part, a lot of this information is covered on, you know, the enrollment forms that you guys have that you include with the Pearl, and you have them sign at the bottom. Now, all of you have local flexibility in creating your enrollment forms, but this year, with the change of some of the Pearl elements, there was a template provided to you. And I was just wondering, does everybody know how to locate that form if, you know, if they needed it? Like, can anybody put in the chat where they would find that, the enrollment template form? Yes, thank you, Jacqueline. It's the TWC website. So very quickly here. So from the TWC site, if you don't have it bookmarked, you would go to where it says student, parents, and educators. You're going to go to adult education, where it says AEL teachers and providers. You'll click on that, the hyperlink there. Then you're going to go all the way to the bottom here, and it says AEL enrollment form and instructions. So you have the template that's provided to you that you of course have local flexibility to change, to add questions that are specific to your grant, because your grant may want additional information that's not on this form, but this is the basic information that we're asking you to gather. Also included are the instructions for the AEL enrollment form, which are for people who like to read legal speak, this will be fun for you to read. But if you're not really good at reading legal speak and you have any questions, again, feel free to just email us your questions at aelta@twc.state.tx.us, and I will try to decode it for you.
All right. Maria, we've got a couple of questions from Abel. First one is, our local high schools are sometimes reluctant in providing withdrawal documents to students. Most of the time, they don't sign the withdrawal document. Is a withdrawal document acceptable without a signature from a school official?
No, because I don't think then it would be considered official. So what you could do then, and again, this is probably local flexibility, and you can correct me on this, but what I would recommend is that your grant have some type of letter from from your organization that shows why it's being requested, because sometimes they won't give it to the student, but if they have some kind of form that says, this is from the adult education and literacy program that I'm going to, and they need it so that I can attend their program, they may be more likely to provide the person with that form. I know, when I was a career counselor, I didn't deal in educational documents, but a lot of times with like getting documents that we needed for proof of employment, sometimes a letter from me, with a, unofficial letterhead or whatever kind of helped the process in getting the information they needed so they could give it to me.
Okay. And he had kind of a follow-up question. What would suffice as withdrawal document if the school no longer exists? And Wayne Crandall put in that is when you use the self-attestation.
Yes.
And
So, and then the longer process would be having them, contact the career schools department for if they went to a high school that no longer exists. There is, and I would have to look it up for you guys, so I can get back to you on that. But there is a way through TEA to try to get documents that are from a high school that's closed.
all right, excellent. And I'm just going to say that Ann Savino put the link to the letter. So please make sure everybody that you're reading the chat pod, because there's a lot of really good advice and suggestions from your peers in there as well.
Okay, so approved forms of identity. The documentation for identity should be a copy of one of the following approved forms listed in AEL letter 0518. And again, if you have an electronic copy of this PowerPoint, you can just click on this here. And as you can see, there's a pop-up and it will go to the letter right away. But listed here are most of the things that are approved forms of identity. Does anybody have any questions on these forms? Most commonly we're going to use we'll use driver's license, right? And then after that, we'll go to like birth certificate and an official record showing date of birth. Like the birth certificate, there are things I know, like Texas, this was the first place I saw where somebody I was helping a customer one time and they broke out this little card and they were like, oh, this is my birth certificate. And I was like, that's not a birth certificate. A birth certificate is big. But they had it like it was a little card that was just almost like a birth certificate, but it was shrunk down to something they could keep in their wallet. So I saw a question, can they be expired? And I was just going to say the same thing that Ann said is yes. They can be expired, although you'll want to recommend to the customer or to the potential participant that they should update it as soon as possible, as we're hoping that after they utilize our services, they're going to either obtain employment or, advance in employment, and they're going to need, proper documentation for that. And that's usually going to be for, they'll need like a driver's license that's not expired.
And another comment in here, it would be helpful if we had a list of which visas would be acceptable. I sometimes feel like I work for the Department of Homeland Security having to do additional research.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
And respond to good suggestion. Thanks, Liz. Send us your current list.
And we'll just add on to that. Give us something to start with. And I did bring up a copy of the letter here just so you guys can see it. This is AEL letter 0518 that you can go to, and there's all of the things that were listed on the slide and maybe a little bit more. And again, there's some local flexibility to document identity that are listed here as well. All righty.
And Liz just put in there that ACC has a comprehensive list of visas not to accept. Anyone from ACC in the house?
Oh, yeah, definitely share that. We could share that to everybody.
It's not exactly a list. We generally don't accept B or F, but there is one exception. I'll try to find it.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think, it's probably similar to when I worked in HR, I had a form of like acceptable, documents for work. And I'm sure it's very similar to that. So if I can find a recent copy of that, I'll share that out as well. Because yeah, just Susan said, there are certain visas that we cannot accept to hire somebody here in the US. Okay, so now Social Security collection. It is very, very, very important to try to get the Social Security number. AEL grantees must be aware that if an individual does not provide a Social Security number, a Texas driver's license number, or a Texas ID number, the individual may still participate in AEL services. So they can still receive services even if they don't provide us a Social Security number or the others I mentioned just now. At the state level, TWC determined that it could reduce the administrative burden on providers by matching TWC data with other data from needs-based programs outside of TWC to determine a participant's eligibility for TANF and employment status. So long before I started, you guys used to have to do a check for, TANF eligibility. But with the Social Security number, because it's connected to other systems that TWC utilizes, they're able to do a data match on the back end and see if this person is somebody who's receiving TANF services. And that takes care of that for you, so you don't have to worry about doing that during enrollment. So it eliminates the need for the providers to manually verify the record of TANF eligibility in Teams. Beginning September 1st, 2019, providers were required to request a Social Security number. So although, participants can receive services, even if they don't have one or don't provide the number, we are required to ask them for it. And the AEL letter, if you'd like more information on that, I do not have it pulled up, but it is AEL letter 0219, which is the collection of certain participant information for performance reporting. So AEL grantees must be aware that while providers must implement protocols to ensure that Social Security number information is accurate, they are not required to collect, copy, or verify an individual's Social Security card or other documentation that includes a full Social Security number, such as tax documents or employment records, either before or after student enrollment. If an individual does not provide a Social Security number, again, a Social Security number, driver's license, or Texas ID number, they can still participate in services. So, but we still want to ask for it and make sure that the correct number gets entered in Teams. If you're not going to keep a copy in their hard file, you'll want to make sure that you entered the right number in Teams. And usually if you can see it visually and just kind of verify, okay, that's the right number, and then put it in Teams, that should suffice. All right, second quiz. All right. Here we have Michael. He has not been attending school for some time. He has been taking care of his brother and sister while his mother works 3 part-time jobs to support the family. He will be turning 17 on December 21st. On December 15th, he visits the local community college where they are offering GED classes. He decides to go on his own while his mother's at work and his siblings are in school. The intake specialist greets him at the front desk and tells him about the many services their program has to offer him. She records all of his contact information and proceeds to tell him about orientation and registration. He is very excited about the opportunity to start classes and possibly learn a trade. He especially is looking forward to the class schedule flexibility and options that were not offered at this high school. What happens next for Michael in enrolling for AEL services? Here are your options. 1, Michael will next be enrolled in class and start the next day. 2, Michael will next fill out an enrollment form and make an appointment for testing. 3, Michael will not be able to proceed with the process of enrollment because he is 16 and does not have a court order. Or finally, 4, Michael will sit in class until he turns 17 and then he can be officially enrolled.
Getting a lot of 3s.
Yes, you guys cannot be fooled, can you? So just reflecting on the last option, we don't really want anybody sitting in class that is not enrolled because we want everyone that are utilizing AEL services to be eligible and to be registered and enrolled in the program.
But isn't it allowable for him to start the enrollment process if, like many of us close for winter break, if he's not going to start until January 20th and he can get all his paperwork in before then? Are we not allowed to start him in the process?
Well, it's a technicality because he's 16 and that is by court order only. We have to wait until he's 17. Which is not, very far,
So what is the definition of enrollment? Is that start class or that start the process?
I understand what you're saying, and I believe in this case, what they put when they were putting enrolled is starting class. So he cannot start services until he is 17. All right, so next, obtaining parent permission for attendance. AEL grantees may enroll an individual within the compulsory age of attendance in the AEL program without a parent's permission if the individual is 17 or 18 years of age, does not have a high school diploma or high school equivalency, and has been determined eligible by a local grantee in accordance with the TEC. However, AEL grantees must first try to obtain permission from the parent or guardian when determining eligibility. This permission must be documented with a signature from the parent or guardian, and signed documentation must be kept in the participant's file. Only if an AEL grantee is unable to obtain a parent or guardian's permission are they able to use the self-attestation for the candidate. AEL grantees have the flexibility of creating their own form, but they must include specified questions as listed in AEL letter 0517 self-attestation for related eligibility to determine eligibility. So again, the self-attestation form is going to be your last resort. And thank you, Anne. Anne put it in the chat. So I don't need to bring it up for you, but you can copy that link, or again, when you're looking back at this PowerPoint later, you can also click on this hyperlink here. All self-attestation forms must be complete and signed both by the participant and the AEL representative. The signed and dated form must be kept in the participant's file. The participant's profile in Teams must also be updated with the information provided on that form. Let's go to the required information that must be collected on the form. So again, you have local flexibility, but there are certain things that we do require that are no local flexibility for you to ask on these forms. As mentioned earlier, a candidate cannot attend AEL services if they are currently enrolled in secondary school. To determine this, the following questions must be asked. Are you attending school? What is the name of your school? What is the last date that you attended school? And are you enrolled for next semester? If a candidate's responses indicate that the candidate is enrolled in secondary school, the candidate is not eligible for AEL services. Next, you'll need to determine whether a candidate is still living at home. If a candidate is determined to still be living at home, they will need the parent or guardian's permission to attend services. The required questions as listed in AEL Letter 0517 are as follows. Do you live in a home that your parent owns or rents? Where do you usually sleep at night? The full address should be recorded. How long have you been at this address? Do you pay or receive bills in your name? What bills do you pay or receive? To what address are bills delivered? What is your parent's or guardian's address if it is different from the address where you sleep at night? When was the last time you slept at your parent's or guardian's address? To determine homelessness, you must include the following prompts or questions on the form. Do you live in a place that has windows, running water, heat, or electricity? Are you living in a place that is overcrowded? Are you staying with a friend or relative because of a loss of housing or economic hardship or for a similar reason? Are you living in a shelter? And this will help you determine homelessness. Are you living in an unsheltered location? Are you living in a hotel or motel because of a loss of economic hardship? Are you living in transitional living? Again, if this is determined that the candidate is homeless, he or she may enroll with or without a parent or guardian's permission. And again, that's AEL Letter 0517. All right, another quiz. Maria is 17 years old and has been living on her own since she came to the United States over a year ago. To date, she has not attended a high school here. She wishes to improve her English and take the GED test in Spanish. A local church is offering English classes and GED classes. What documentation would Maria need to enroll and begin classes? No documentation because she was never enrolled in class in the United States, a self-attestation form that shows her to not be enrolled in high school and to not be living at home, or C, a letter from her mother who resides in Russia. And I'm seeing a lot of B's. Oh, there was another one, a court order. Okay. So the correct answer, yes, was B, a self-attestation form that shows her to not be enrolled in high school and to not be living at home. Okay, next we'll talk about determining basic skills deficiency. We have reviewed the eligible population to be served and documentation collection. Let's go over some pre-testing requirements, which states that each AEL candidate must test before enrolling in class. The test results will inform you if the person is eligible by placing them into educational functioning levels, or what we also call EFLs. Information on these requirements, as well as guidance on testing, can be found in the Texas Adult Education and Literacy Assessment Guide for program year 2021. Providers must be aware that the need for testing at intake can be influenced by the customer status in the program. Some customers may be completely new to AEL with no previous record in an AEL program and no existing participant or testing information. Others may be continuing without a break across a program year or be returning to services after exit and have some evidence of previous participation, such as test scores in teams. Under guidance provided in the assessment guide, a participant who has exited the program and returns either in the same program year or in a different one must take a test to reestablish eligibility before enrolling in an AEL class, regardless of how old the last test result recorded in Teams is. Under circumstances created by the pandemic, however, an exception to this guidance has been made to allow customers who have exited to re-enroll in services without being tested if they have a valid test score that is not expired. And of course, that is not more than 365 days old. All content areas of a test must be administered in the pretest and in the post-test sequences with the following exceptions. If a participant is a referral from a college with a documented TSIA score, providers only need to give the content area for which the participant has placed on the TSIA, levels 1 through 5. If a participant is enrolling in a class that only provides instruction in one content area, for example, a math TSIA bootcamp, the provider may administer a test in the content area of the class only. If a participant has passed a section of the text chase, he or she is not required to receive a pretest in the content area he or she has passed. If a participant is enrolling in an IET program, at the time of the pretest, the provider may administer the content area most relevant to measuring the participant's success in the IET. If there is another documented reason for only administering one content area of the pretest, such as a specific participant goal or objective, providers must retain documentation of the reason for not administering all content areas of the pretest. So, do we have any questions?
Will the non-NRS participant option continue this next academic year? I realize they don't count for our enrollment targets, but we still aren't allowed to test in person, and CASAS remote is rough for many.
Oh, that's hard. You're still not able to test in person. I hope that changes for you soon. But yes, the non-NRS, non-approved NRS will continue this next program year. However, it is highly encouraged to, to try to do in-person or remote testing if possible. So,
Okay.
let's see here.
Is best literacy assessment required for program year 21-22 if students take online classes and are still reluctant to come to the site for testing?
Okay, so good question. So if you can't test them in best literacy, I would try to look at another option. I know Susan had mentioned that CASAS is remote is rough for many, but if that is an option that you could use, I would recommend utilizing that, because best literacy I know has to be done in person. So I would try to utilize another option. Yes. Yes, I know like one part of the Best Plus you can do remotely, but the literacy part has to be done in person. And did you want to like expand on that?
No, actually, I think that's the best answer. I mean,
Yeah.
you have a lot of students that you've been using or would use normally that tool. You want to look at an alternative if you need one.
Okay, thank you. For individuals with a high school diploma, if a participant is a referral from a college with a documented TSIA score, providers only need to give the content area for which the participant has placed on the TSIA. I mentioned that earlier. So remember Alyssa, as we mentioned at the very beginning, I think she was in the first quiz. Okay. So she was a recent high school graduate who did not qualify for college level courses after taking the TSI or TSIA. But what if she did have a high school diploma but never took the TSI? She would have to take all the pretests and could be eligible for services if she showed to be basic skills deficient. All right, so when pre-testing a candidate, a state-approved assessment must be administered. The following tests have been approved to assess adult basic education customers to establish qualification for services and educational functioning level. The Comprehensive Adult Student Assessment System, or CASAS for short, Reading Goal Series, which is valid through February 2nd, 2021, and TABE 11 and 12, which is approved through September 7th, 2023. For more information on these tests, they can be found in AEL Letter 0718, which is entitled Suitable Tests for Use in AEL, and in the assessment guide. When testing an English language learner, you have a few options, all which have been approved for use through the letter I mentioned earlier. Best Plus 2.0 and Best Literacy, as we were just talking about, CASAS Life and Work Listening Assessments, as well as CASAS Reading Assessments. If a customer maxes out on any of these tests, they can take the TABE Class E to be assessed for services.
Maria, somebody's put in, wait, what? The CASAS is up in February. What does that mean?
This PowerPoint probably needs to be updated because I'm sure that it's just the date of the CASAS. It has a date range. I'm sure that it was renewed and we're still using the same CASAS form. I'll look back on that and I'll get back to you guys because I caught that just as I was reading it. I was like, wait a minute, this is 2021. We're in 2021. So I will check on that and get the updated information for y'all. But good ear, Anna. All right, so effective July 1st, 2019, providers have the option to individuals in just one content area to determine eligibility. Enroll an individual in class if the individual is found eligible, and then stagger delivery of the remaining contact area tests after the start of services while the individual is earning contact hours. Providers retain the option to administer all tests to an individual at one time or more than one test in a test series before placing the participant in a class. The objective of the new option is to offer flexibility for providers to schedule services in such a way as to reduce potential test fatigue and place participants more quickly into immediate educational services, as well as to improve retention. Now, again, this is just an option. This is not something, this is just to make it a little easier on you guys. However, sometimes it makes it easier, sometimes it doesn't, because if you're staggering the tests, then you're going to have staggered post-test dates as well. 5 class days, no more than 12 hours. The provider must complete the testing in the remaining content areas within 5 class days of direct instruction, but no later than the first 12 contact hours, unless the individual has requested an exemption from testing in all content areas. Flexibility in selecting content areas for testing. Providers have discretion in selecting which content areas to administer first in the test series and should do so based on the individual's predetermined objectives, class curriculum, or other criteria. After eligibility, tests can accrue contact hours. While hours accrued during the initial pretest to determine eligibility cannot be recorded as contact hours, after you've determined eligibility through the initial pretest, individuals are placed in classes and the remainder of the tests in the sequence can be counted toward direct contact hours by entering them into teams. You can test them until eligible. If the first test does not establish basic education eligibility, the provider must administer a test in another content area to determine eligibility. For example, if a participant scores at level 6 in math and then basic education eligibility must be established with another test before the participant can receive AEL services. Just elaborating on that example. So let's say they score high in math, but then they take the literacy portion and they score low. So that's your other test that's going to determine them, eligible for services based on the low score they received for the literacy. Participants with documented disabilities will be granted reasonable accommodations upon request during testing and any program services. During program intake and comprehensive assessment, providers must ensure that participants have the opportunity to identify needs, including but not limited to identified or suspected disabilities that may require additional testing supports and review. If applicable, support must be provided to ensure the participants with disabilities have an equal opportunity to benefit from the services. Documented disabilities. The individual can present a formal document provided by a qualified professional That would be like a physician, educational counselor, psychologist, special education teacher, or a rehabilitation counselor. So like just because their parents say so, that is not a formal document. So let's see, things such as a doctor's report, a diagnostic test, or other formal record of disability that includes any of the following: a diagnosis of the disability, whether physical or cognitive, evaluation of the educational implications of the diagnosis and the impact of the disability on areas of functioning, and recommendations for the specific strategies and accommodations in education. Reasonable and necessary as provided by laws and regulations that are protecting individuals with disabilities required by the disability. So if someone discloses to you that they have a disability and they are requesting accommodations, you can request a form from their doctor or their counselor they'll bring to you that states what I just mentioned here. Yeah, what their disability is and recommendations for their specific, what they would need to be successful in receiving your services. So that kind of goes a lot like with employment. It's going to be reasonable accommodations. So that's something that you will look at when you receive the doctor's note or the counselor's note, and you'll look to make sure that these are reasonable accommodations that you can provide so that the student will be successful in your program. And of course, coming from vocational rehabilitation, I highly recommend, referring them to VR services as well, because if you're not able to provide some of the recommendations, VR might be able to, or vocational rehabilitation may be able to provide the accommodations so that they could take these accommodations with them or bring them to class with them so that they can be successful in class.
And Maria, you have a
Mhm.
question. If they present a former evaluation, it cannot be older than 5 years. Is that correct?
That's a good question. I'll have to look back on that. Jenny, how far back do we go for doctor's notes and stuff and everything for VR? Because I know it'd be very similar.
Yeah, there's no timeline on it.
Mhm.
However, I would say if something, was substantially older, it depending on the disability, it might be a good idea to have a new evaluation just to see what their current functioning level is at right now, because if they have something that's 5 or 10 years old, some of that information might have changed.
Very good recommendation. And for that, again, you can refer them to VR if they're like, well, I don't, I
I
can't.
don't know how to do that. I couldn't
Yeah, I don't know how to
afford
do that. I can't
That's-
pay for it. VR can assist them with, the evaluations in determining whether the diagnosis is still the same, or, there are new complications, or if they've gotten, or certain things have changed. Test administrators must follow accommodations guidance as provided by the test publisher, as indicated in each test administration manual from the publisher. And you can find those in these hyperlinks as well for each one. All right, now let's go over a testing situation when it may not be clear whether a person is qualified for services. It may be a case that a candidate tests beyond the range of the level 6 HSE. If this candidate does not have a secondary school credential, this person would still be eligible for services because they can show positive measurable skills gain performance by earning either a post-secondary enrollment MSG after exit or an HSE achievement MSG before the end of the program year. Remember that all testing instruments for the candidate need to be kept in their file for documentation and compliance purposes. Okay. And now, if a provider determines through comprehensive assessment that the English language learner tested out of the score range of the state-approved ESL test, the AEL grantee must document it in the participant's file how English proficiency was determined. And so you can refer to this handout in Table 4. It has descriptors and a scale scores for the different AEL tests. Here are some examples of the facts on which a determination of proficiency is based. Like I said, you would need to document in the participant's file and in Teams. So these are examples that you could use that were a determined proficiency. The participant tested out of the range on a state-approved ESL test. The participant completed an alternate ESL assessment, including a local developed one that verified sufficient English proficiency for the participant to meet his or her goals. The participant is entering an AEL program offered through a community college with information from the TSIA that identifies the participant is deficient in one or more content areas on the TSIA. So you're basically providing documentation as proof why you're still enrolling this person into services. Okay, so again, you want to put that documentation in the participant's file, and then you can use any NRS approved test as a pretest for the English language learner, and whichever tool was used to establish eligibility must also be used for the post-testing under an achievement on a pretest post-test for MSG type 1A. So for example, going back to Best Plus and Best Plus literacy, the most common thing I see usually in email questions that I get is that someone tested out of Best Plus. Our recommendation is then to utilize one of the other tools like CASAS or TABE Class E as a tool to determine eligibility. The participant must make appropriate gains on an NRS approved test, or they must earn one of the other MSGs. All right, and so we have a quiz again. Angela dropped out of high school her senior year to take care of her mother who had a terminal illness. She has been out of school for 3 years now and is wanting to get her high school equivalency. When she takes the TABE test and scores level 6 high, ASE in all areas, can she still qualify to participate in AEL services? And here are your, oops, I gave you the answer. But that's okay. You guys some of you were already putting yes. So yes, because she does not have a secondary school credential. All right. So as you can see by the information covered in this course, there are many layers when determining eligibility for AEL candidates. To keep things manageable, remember 3 basic things. First, the candidates must meet the criteria for the population to be served. This includes being at least 16 years of age and being basic skills deficient, not having a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent, or they are an English language learner. Second, the required documentation must be collected. And third, all candidates must be pre-tested before a candidate can be enrolled into a class for services. These 3 things are required to be fulfilled. Okay, so on March 13th, 2020, Governor Greg Abbott declared the Texas a disaster site in response to the pandemic. The declaration spurred the closure of most of our educational and workforce development institutions across the state. AEL grantees and their providers responded by transitioning service delivery from on-site locations to distance and remote delivery platforms. And you guys did an awesome job at that. For the amount of time that it took you guys, I feel my personal opinion was you guys did that very quickly. This required a change to most aspects of service delivery, including education and training services and testing for performance accountability measures and follow-up services, all of which almost exclusively rely on on-site in-person activity. The following slides are going to cover some of the flexibility in some of the areas that we talked about earlier. And at this time, these changes are considered temporary. We will let you know, however, once anything changes. Like, for example, if it changes where we decide that we are not going to utilize the non-NRS approved option anymore, we will let you know right away. So for the purpose of enrolling students into services in a timely manner, providers are given the option of testing students with a non-approved NRS. This will allow students to be added to a class in teams so their hours can be tracked. However, students who are tested with a non-approved NRS test will not be counted towards performance. So that's the caveat. If you're going to utilize a non-approved NRS test, they are kind of like a ghost in the classroom. They're like there, but they're not really going to be counted towards your performance. All students who are participating in services must be recorded in teams. Additionally, at this time, test scores are valid for 365 days instead of the 150 days. And it is important to remember that these are temporary adjustments given to continue services for fluidly as possible during this time with the limited face-to-face availability I'm learning is still for many of you. So during this time of transition, many programs were unable to provide on-site testing, therefore prompting many of them to turn to remote testing to continue services. And these are the NRS approved tests that are available for remote testing. All right, so now we have approached the final quiz. All right, so final quiz, question number 1. What documentation is required to be collected from all customers in order to enroll in AEL services? Select all that apply. So, an enrollment form with all participant individual record layout required information, a signed release of information form, documentation of the customer's identity, or all of the above. Yes, all of the above. Great. Okay. Final quiz question number 2. True or false? A customer is required to have a Texas ID or Texas driver's license to participate in services.
Getting falses and no's.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting pop-ups and I'm getting distracted.
You're fine.
I'm like, I'm still here, I promise. Okay. Yes, false. All right. Final quiz question number 3. Where can information on pre-testing be found? In AEL letter 0518, the approved forms of identity. In AEL letter 0219, collection of certain participant information for performance reporting. In the assessment guide, or in AEL letter 0517, self-attestation for age-related eligibility.
Getting a lot of 3s.
Yes. All right, and final quiz question number 4. Nadia has a PhD in physics from the University of Zagreb in Croatia and had been working as a scientist in a lab in the Ukraine for over 7 years before coming to the US. Currently, she's working for a local lab as a technician. She would like to get promoted as a supervisor, however, her English skills and communication is limited. Would she be able to enroll in AEL services? Let's see. Options are no, she has a PhD and would not qualify for services. No, she is a working professional, and AEL services are only for people who need an HSE or who need to improve their English but are not working. Yes, through pre-testing, she could qualify for services. Her PhD, because it was acquired in another country, does not disqualify her for services. Oops. Okay, you guys saw the answer, but I looked at the chat real quick and I saw that people were putting 3.
Yes. Yeah, they were all answering before you got there. So.
Yeah, I'm just like, we're getting to the end and I guess I'm getting, my finger is getting trigger happy. All right, final quiz question number 5. If a 16-year-old is proven to be homeless through self-attestation, they will be able to enroll without a parent's permission. Select the best answer. True. A customer does not need a parent's permission to enroll in services if they are determined to be homeless, or false. Self-attestation does not apply to 16-year-olds. They can only enroll if court ordered. False isn't number 3. A 16-year-old cannot enroll without a parent's permission. And yes, I'm seeing lots of 2s. Yes.
Lots of 2s, yes.
Yes, they have to be court ordered. Doesn't matter if the parent's like, it's okay. No, it needs to come from court. So, but once they're 17, they can get parental permission, and that's okay. Okay, and that's all I have for this presentation. Do we have any final questions or anything else that you guys would like me to look into for you?
Maria, I just have a clarification. I know Susan mentioned about serving 16-year-olds before getting the court order. And I was just checking on that, and actually just the best practice. They could sit in some orientation services, but you really not want to begin the process of enrollment testing until you have the documentation in hand.
That's good to know. Okay, and then I saw some pop-ups going with the question on the CASA state. Were you able to get?
Yes.
Okay.
So according to NRS, all of the tests are currently approved through 2023.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, and so I'll go ahead and I'll update that on the presentation slides here as well, so that if somebody else gives this again in the future, they won't be saying the wrong date like me.
Maria, there's a question about remote instruction and the new program year from Liz Moya.
Well, we do have some time, so that's fine. You can go ahead and ask, and then if we're not able to answer, I can go ahead and get the answer for you and get back to you. So go ahead and feel free to.
Okay, well, so because we are part of an ISD, and like I mentioned earlier, everything that is stated in a written policy is gold. And so there is a new House Bill 1468 that was rejected in the Texas Senate, and that stated that the delivery of remote instruction did not pass. What that means for us in AEL, although we're part of an ISD, unless it's stated otherwise by TWC, we would not be able to provide remote instruction as an option. I know we have the DL policy, but that's very different from remote instruction. So I was kind of asking maybe as a wish, or just throwing that out there, if there's anything that's going to come out indicating that we can either continue with remote instruction, or it's highly encouraged as a secondary option, or something in writing to indicate that it can continue beyond the pandemic. Otherwise, we will not be able to serve those students who are otherwise cannot attend classes due to transportation issues or distance, or those type of situations.
Hey, Liz, and I'm going to jump in, Maria, because I know Lewis asked that question yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, what we clarified, I mean, I'm going to look further into it, but since the House bill was trying to allow the continuation of remote instruction, it was a K through 12 bill. So, that has never been the primary guidance that would, trump our guidance. So I'm going to check to see what issue is at hand here that's causing some, discussion. But it was a bill for K through 12, as I understand. So
yeah,
we had no comment on it when it went through, as I understand, when it went through the session. And I'm going to check on that. And we'll get more information to you.
Well, thank you. And you're absolutely right. It is K-12, but unless there's anything else provided by AEL, then we are held to those same standards, unfortunately.
I'll talk with you on that, just because there are a number of other requirements that align with K through 12 that I'm sure we're not adhering to. So let me check with you on that, okay?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Is there anybody out there in another ISD who's having their superintendent or their, oversight organization pushing down that requirement in terms of the prohibition.
Oh, Susan said subcontractors are doing face-to-face, but for our direct ISDs, they are enrolling in our general population synchronous classes. Okay. Good to know. All right. Well, we are finishing early today.
So yes, Mick, we are done for the day. Glad you all joined us today.